the kitchen again. Now you might be wondering what our program is going to look like, so I thought I'd give you a bit of a taste of how we hope to approach our cooking program from the Grow, Cook, Eat theory and philosophy that we hold. So within the philosophy of Grow, Cook, Eat, it's all about understanding where food comes from and being sustainable with that food, and understanding how to use food in various ways. So a good example of that, at the end of my week, or maybe the fortnight after you've done your normal weekly shop, if that's what you sort of do, you often find bits and pieces sitting around. So you might have a brown banana, for example, and I have heard, unfortunately, people throwing them away thinking, oh, they're no good to eat. Then I've also got here some apples, and they're really quite shriveled up, but I know inside that is probably going to be quite good for some recipes. I've also got some pears that I bought hoping my kids would take one to school each day, but didn't. So we ended up thinking about, well, what can we do with those? And I've also got some grapes that often hang around at the bottom of the fridge, which is quite annoying, but at the same time I'm sure we can come up with a great recipe. The other thing you might have is in your dry store, you might have foods that, you might use only part of a packet, and you might throw it away thinking you're not going to use it again. Try not to do that. Put it into a closed airtight container, and hopefully you might be able to use it in another recipe. So I've got a few things like some white spelt flour, almond meal, a gluten-free flour mix, as well as some rolled oats. Things like that sometimes you think, oh, what can I do with bits and pieces? And I'm going to show you how. Okay, let's get cooking. We're going to start with the apples, and for this particular recipe we're going to have to peel and core them. Now to do that really quickly, rather than just using a peeler, I'm going to use a slinky machine, which is a lot of fun because it takes off the skin as well as the core at the same time. Okay, let's go. So wind, 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 and you'll see all the magic happen. It's going to take off the skin there. Now, of course, the skin is where all the nutrients are, and it's such a shame to maybe throw them away. But in my garden and at my house, these are great for my chickens or even my pet galah, so they don't have to go to waste. Now, when you pull off the apple from the core, you will see that you've got now a bit of a twisty apple. See how it just falls apart? So what I want to do is I want to put them into a bowl, okay, as I do them. The important thing here is just to be careful as you release your core so that you don't accidentally prong yourself, because they are sharp. So even if you're using this with kids, just be mindful that there are sharp components. Okay. And safety in the kitchen is really, really important also, just to making sure that if kids are cooking with you, that there is an adult present, particularly when you're working with hot or sharp goods, or foods maybe they've never really worked with before. So here we go again. So see how quick and easy that is. Okay, so keep on going with the apples, depending on how many you have, winding it around and around. And as I said, all those skins can definitely go to good use in your garden when you've made compost, or when the chickens have eaten them and then they've composted your garden. So you'll see my apples nice and thin, which is great, and I don't even really have to chop them up again. I can just use my hand because the apples are a little bit on the softer side, being that they've been in the fridge probably for a little bit longer than we would all hope to particularly eat them fresh. Now these can go brown, so just a little quick cheat, just so that you're not going to let your apples go too brown, because they can make your cooking look a bit funky, is just add a bit of water into your bowl, and you can either put a squeeze of lemon juice in there or just a dash of vinegar as well. And it's not going to flavour anything, it's really just to stop the process of browning. So it helps to slow down that what we call oxidisation and that browning happen. Okay, so they're just sitting in there while I'm working with my kora. And I know my little birds and chickens are going to really enjoy having them. You can see I've got a little bit here that didn't quite happen, so you may occasionally just have to chop off a little bit with a knife, and that's okay. But just pop them all together. Alright. Okay, well, we are now at the point where we're ready to start making our yummy apple and caramel sauce. So what we need is some butter. This is a really nice butter that's salted, and I often tend to go for the salted, just then I don't need to add so much salt to when I'm cooking. And the recipe actually calls for caster sugar, and the main reason why is so that you can get a really quite nice clear caramel. I like using raw sugar in a lot of my cooking rather than going the whole processed white caster sugar. It really depends on what you're making, but for this particular recipe it will cope with this raw sugar. However, I do want to bring the crystal size down. So you might see a recipe and it says caster sugar and you might not have any in your cupboard. Guess what? What you can do is in a coffee grinder or maybe even a food processor or even a bit of hard grit using a mortar and pestle, you could possibly then turn your sugar into something a lot more finer, and that would be basically your caster sugar. So I'm just going to quickly show you how that works. So you can see the granules in there and they're fairly good size. Okay, move the sugar into my grinder. It's going to make a little bit of noise, so cover those ears if you're a bit sensitive to noise. So you can hear that little bit of noise, and now I've got a really fine powder. Let's have a little look at that compared to what we just had a minute ago. Okay, so that's going to be our sugar for our caramel. So to start the caramel, we take our butter, and I'm taking about 50 grams of butter and putting that into a pan that's already been heating for me. Okay, this is our little induction stove that of course is connected because it's just electricity. Now I don't want that butter getting too hot. I don't really want to add too much colour through there. So being induction, it heats up very quickly and it also helps store in the heat. So you do sometimes have to just take it off the heat a little bit so that you're not overdoing it. If you're working with gas, you'd probably find that you're going to be dialing it down a little bit. Whereas with my induction stove, I find I just need to take it off the heat and just let things do their own thing in a way. Because as you can see, I've got beautiful foamy butter happening, which is the basis of our yummy caramel we're going to make. And then I can put it back on the heat a little bit as it starts to die down. I can dial this stove down, but taking off the pan means that it's sort of allowed to cool off a bit. With our apple, which we prepared earlier, we're just going to drain that out. So we're going to drain that out in a colander so that you can hopefully have not too much water in there. So we obviously want a nice caramel, and water will affect the viscosity or the quality of caramel you're making. Okay, so just going to put that there, and I'll take this over to my side where I'll need that very soon. So my butter is cooking away, and I just need my spatula, and I'm going to move the butter around, and you can see there's still just a little bit that's not quite melted in here, but I'm going to start adding my sugar. So I'm going to add my sugar in, okay, and it's quite powdery as you can see when I toss that through, and again take that off the heat so we don't have too much. We don't want to burn the sugar and the butter. And we're starting to get now a nice light caramel. Now depending on the sugar you use will depend on what the colour of this caramel will be. So if you were using traditional white caster, you would find that you would have a more glassy appearance, would not be quite as granulated, and it'd be maybe almost like a toffee. But this is still caramel, guys, okay, and it's going to be a bit rustic. Okay, so my caramel has started to form. You'll see that as I've taken it off the heat, you might see some separation, which is the butter's moving away from the sugar, which is fine. It's going to go back on the heat shortly with the apple, but I wanted to show you some spices that you can use in this. So classic cinnamon, this is the cinnamon stick that you might see, but I'm going to use the powdered version because I don't really want chunks within my caramel, okay, when I'm presenting it. And the other thing I have on the bench here I'm going to be adding is some vanilla. Now again, there's lots of different types of vanilla. There's vanilla essence, there's vanilla extract, there's super strong syrups that have got vanilla in them, and then of course you've got the actual original, the vanilla bean. Now vanilla beans are a tropical plant, and they grow like an orchid or come off an orchid plant, and they're absolutely delicious. These ones actually have come from Papua New Guinea. I was very fortunate a few years ago to go to Papua New Guinea and see what the world over there was like, and we bought some of these back, and they are pretty divine. What I find really useful, if you're thinking, oh, they're quite expensive and they're not the cheapest of things, what I find I do is I will pull out the yummy black goodness inside, But then once I've got that, I'm not going to throw that away. What I tend to do is actually put that in my jar of sugar. So if I've got a caster sugar jar happening in my pantry, which I don't have today, but when I do, what I do is I pop them into the sugar, and they'll actually dry out in there and infuse the beautiful vanilla flavour in my sugar. So that's another way to enrich your cooking as well, and then reusing something that maybe you would traditionally throw away. So I'm going to show you how to split a bean. So normally I start by cutting down half and then down through the middle again so that you can see inside. I'm just going to grab my little knife just so that I can ease out that beautiful vanilla. I'm going to show you the beautiful seeds on my, probably on my finger might be best to show you. Can you see those vanilla seeds? They're tiny, aren't they? But they do pack a punch. Yeah, and they're delicious. So I'm going to pop half of this vanilla bean into my mixture, and that's going to give this beautiful caramel and apple some really great character. Okay, but you can see how tiny and a bit tricky to get out, but at the same time, once you get them out, you can see them sort of all over your fingers. Just be careful. I am using a knife, but I'm using the back of a knife. With children, I'd probably encourage them to use a spoon here, okay, or get their adult helper to help them out. Okay, and of course, as I said, you know, if you don't have vanilla beans, not a problem. Maybe try some of the extract. You can get the vanilla essence usually in most grocery stores. So it's just all about what you can afford, what you have. So try and use that up as best you can. So I'm putting this back on the heat now with those beautiful spices. And I'm going to pop my apple inside, okay? Now the good thing about this is you're going to have minimal washing up. So just remember, when you're cooking this, you're going to be using this frying pan in the oven. Now you might wonder about this handle I have here. The handle on this particular pan comes off, which is really handy. So you either need a full metal oven or get a pan like this that is actually rated for the oven, and handles can sometimes come off. So just think about the type of equipment you are doing this in. So I'm now getting my apple in, and it's going to turn into a beautiful apple caramel. And then I've also got my pastry sheets sitting here defrosting, okay? So I took them out of the freezer about half an hour ago, letting them sit there ready to go. And I've decided to go with 2 sheets just to give me a little bit of extra thickness in my beautiful tart that I'm making. Okay, so you can see my caramel is now starting to really coat my apple. I'll bring it over so you can see it a bit closer. Okay. If only you could smell this, eh? We definitely invent smell-o-vision, don't we? Because you cannot quite do it justice. But, you know, that's what I'm hoping is, you know, while we're here exploring in our kitchen, doing the cooking programs, it can be a really multi-sensory experience. You know, it might be that you have kids that maybe don't really like to eat many things. Sometimes I've found just letting them explore things like this, you know, without the pressure of having to try it. They might try it, particularly if they're with some friends or people they feel comfortable with. So, you know, there's lots of good things you can be doing to encourage, you know, I guess a broader range of food to be eaten. But it's not an easy thing. And as I've said to you, I do have a son with autism. And I guess I was very blessed that he actually eats most things. There are a few little things that I find texture-wise that he doesn't like as much. Potatoes was one. So potatoes, if you boiled them into a mash, he wasn't a big fan. We also had him say to me he didn't like the skin on potato, whereas he loves a potato chip. It's interesting, isn't it? But I have, when I do my other work, which is peer support, outside the cooking work, you know, there's such a broad range of kids out there that have different ways that they approach food. Some love it, some just find it really tricky and challenging. So need to acknowledge that we're all different. And as I think someone sent me a Facebook message the other day, there is strength in difference, not similarity. And I really do feel that. All right, now you can see my caramel's cooked down a little bit, even while it's been off the heat. This pan's actually got quite a bit of heat booming through it, and as you can see, I'm on a metal bench, and it's actually quite hot to touch. Thankfully with metal it's not going to affect my bench, but if you were working on a normal kitchen bench, probably a good idea to have some kind of insulating, even a chopping board underneath, as long as it's not going to be a plastic one. Probably one of those wooden ones would be ideal to put it on. Now, okay, so it's time to put on the pastry. So we put on the pastry, and I'm going to layer it over the top, and you'll notice I'm going to start tucking it a little bit underneath the caramel. Okay, and the reason I'm going the second one, it just gives less likely for my, hopefully, caramel to fall out on me. Okay, so the idea here is we're going to put it back on the stove just for a few minutes, just so it can start bubbling away under there and cooking just a little bit more. And the other thing they suggest you do is just put a few little markers inside so that it will alleviate any extra moisture, I guess, in there, and it will let some steam happen so that it doesn't blow up like a balloon. So let's do that. We'll pop that on the stove just for a couple of minutes, and then I'll be able to turn that off, and then we're actually going to then move across to our oven. So as I said, this big beast, my Unox, I'm really looking forward to be able to use it, but it is a steam combi oven, and unfortunately, because we don't have our water supply and grease trap yet, we're not allowed to use that. So we're going to turn to our trusty little ovens that we use actually with the participants that come to our programs, and they've been really good. They're a little Breville oven, and I must say I've been able to make most things in there. I've been able to do roast dinner, I've been able to do cakes, I've been able to do tarte tatin. You know, there's lots of things you can do in those ovens. Okay, I'm at the Breville oven that we're going to cook our tarte tatin in. Now you'll notice if I bring down the tarte tatin, there is a bit of caramel that has gone onto my pastry. The traditional method would be to make your caramel and apple and let it go cold, so that when you put your pastry on top, it will not get so soggy like this, but I'm just jumping through a step, and I'm going to show you that it's not going to end up too badly. So we're going to put it in the oven. Now remembering I have a handle that can come off, okay, so making sure that it fits inside. I'm going to slide it into the middle. I've got it on my bake setting, and I've got it on about 180, I think it is, yeah, roughly 180 degrees, and I'm going to let that cook until we've got a nice crispy pastry. And then basically what you would do is you actually invert the whole pie and have it on a beautiful platter, and of course you can either eat it hot or cold, totally up to you. Here we are having a look at our pie and how it's going. So the tarte tatin, you can see, is still bubbling away around the edges with the caramel, and the puff pastry is doing its thing, puffing up. Not quite browned enough yet, but we'll get there. Just checking in on our tarte tatin. It's starting to show some nice volume and crispiness, as well as you can see a little bit of browning occurring. Not quite there yet, but we'll keep on watching. Starting to look good. Look at that nice caramelisation and browning of the pastry. And I can definitely smell it all happening. I can smell all those yummy spices we put in there, and the caramel and the apples. Should be good. Right, the tarte tatin is out of the oven. It's smelling beautiful, it's hot. There's a little bit of steam coming up through those holes that I put in earlier, and it's ready to see if it will flip out onto my plate. So the best way to do this, guys, is to put your plate like this, and the benefit, I guess, of having a detachable handle means that you don't need to handle the handle. You can then just hopefully focus on flipping your pie out. So here I've got a couple of different methods, just bringing it close to the edge of my bench so that I can reach over, and then you need to be fairly quick and pop it over, okay, and then put it back down, okay, and then what we will do, you can see the caramel probably starting to spill a little bit, okay, and that's okay, we'll all be good, and then we'll lift her out, and there is my tarte tatin. So for a quick, easy dessert, could be eaten like that with a bit of ice cream or some cream or some custard, or you could even let it chill and then cut it up and do the same thing with it. So enjoy. Right, I'm back at home. Kids would love a piece of this beautiful tarte tatin, which I'm going to do. Don't have any cream, don't have any what's the other thing, custard, but I do have some yogurt, and I made some beautiful lovely Greek style yogurt, but it doesn't have any sugar. So if you find that it is a little bit on the bitter side or tart side, you can add just a little bit of icing sugar, which I'm going to do, and pretty much I just stir that in, and then we are going to be ready to go to cut this beautiful thing and have a taste. Okay, cutting your tarte tatin, you'll hear a beautiful crunch as you crunch through the pastry. And you can see that it's fairly easy to cut through, which is good. And I'm going to cut some nice healthy sized pieces so I know that my kids are going to love this. And I'm going to put some in a bowl. There's one. And I'm going to pop some yogurt on top that's just had a little bit of icing sugar in it just to take the tartness off. And I'm going to hand this to my son Harrison, who's going to give a taste test for me. Come on it down, Harrison. Alright, get in there, dig in, and tell me what you think. Cut myself a piece, and what is it like? Can you describe it in any way? Well, your mouth is full. Try not to eat
Tastes like apple.
Apple, yes. Anything else you can pick up on in flavours?
Caramel.
Caramel.
Cinnamon.
Ooh, cinnamon. There you go. Anything else?
No.
No?
He's not going to stop until the bowl's empty.